Hey, here's our flipped video on global warming. This ties into our gas unit because of the gases involved in global warming. Here's a model of a greenhouse. This is why it's called the greenhouse effect. Visible light comes in through the glass of a greenhouse. The sunlight warms the inside, including the plants. Plants give off infrared radiation, known as heat, which is trapped by the glass, so the greenhouse gets warmer. Check out this diagram of the greenhouse effect on the Earth. Take a second to study how it's working. It's basically the same idea as the plant greenhouse. Now the greenhouse effect. We think of the greenhouse effect as being all bad, but if we didn't have the greenhouse effect here on Earth, our average temperature on Earth would be negative 21 degrees Celsius, which is way too cold for life, because negative 21 degrees Celsius means there's no liquid water on the planet, and we know liquid water is necessary for life. With our greenhouse effect, we're at about plus 15 degrees Celsius, which is a comfortable temperature and allows for liquid water and life. So again, no greenhouse effect, we wouldn't be alive, but we need some greenhouse effect. The issue is, are we causing too much greenhouse effect? Here are the main greenhouse gases. We're going to focus on the first two, carbon dioxide and methane. But there are lots of other gases that cause a greenhouse effect, that trap the Earth's infrared or radiant heat so that it doesn't go back out into space and keeps the Earth just a little bit too warm than we want. Let's talk about carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Carbon dioxide does a very good job of trapping infrared radiation or the Earth's heat and causing global temperatures to rise. Carbon dioxide levels fluctuate naturally. As the Earth's temperature rises, some carbon dioxide is released from the oceans, as we've talked about in class, due to solubility. And as temperatures fall, carbon dioxide is absorbed by the oceans. We talked about that during solubility. But now the question is, are we contributing excess amounts of carbon dioxide, large amounts of carbon dioxide, to the atmosphere that wouldn't normally be there? And we're doing this by burning fossil fuels. This could be burning gasoline, burning wood, coal, propane in your barbecue, natural gas in your homes. All of this is emitting carbon dioxide, high levels, which traditionally were never released before because we didn't have so many machines running on these types of fuels in the past, nor did we have so many people. So the question is our influence really dramatically changing the global carbon dioxide levels? And that's what some people argue. Here's a graph of carbon dioxide levels from the 1950s until just last month. And you can see it's gone from about 315 parts per million all the way up to almost 400 parts per million, which is really a marked increase in a short number of years. Here's a graph talking about carbon emissions per capita. That means per person, looking at a variety of countries around the world. And you see that the United States, per person, has one of the highest, or the highest on this chart, emissions of carbon emissions per person. So that's something that we could work on as a country to reduce that and reduce our impact on global warming. Carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas we have to be concerned about. Methane is another major greenhouse gas. In fact, methane is 20% better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So methane is even a more potent greenhouse gas. It just doesn't make up for the large amount because we don't release such large amounts of methane. In fact, we all release a little bit of methane, but large herbivores are one of the major contributors to methane being released into the atmosphere. Now this is Rocco. He's not the largest herbivore, but he is a large herbivore, 75 pounds, and he eats grass. Grass is really, really hard to digest, so he has a lot of bacteria in his gut that help him digest this grass. And one of the results is that he produces methane. Now, on his scale, there's not that many tortoises like this in the world, so it's not such a huge scale problem. But if you think about other animals that eat grass that we eat, such as cows, right? Pigs don't eat grass, but they do eat vegetation that is hard to digest. Both of those are contributing large amounts of methane to the atmosphere. If you look at a feedlot filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of cows, all eating large amounts of difficult to digest food, or a pig farm, and you're getting large amounts of methane. In fact, there are 1.5 billion cows on the planet today. That's a lot of cows. And one cow can make 100 to 500 liters of methane a day. So we're talking about large production of methane being released into the atmosphere. And like I said, methane is better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So it is a concern. And one thing we could do to reduce methane's effect on global warming would be to reduce our intake, especially of beef, because cattle are the prime producers of methane on the planet. Here's a graph to show how greenhouse gases are affecting temperature. Here's our 15 degrees Celsius or centigrade, which is where we should be, right? The positive effects of global warming. And then here are projected values if we keep producing carbon dioxide at the rate that we are right now. So you think of it, it's just a few degrees larger, but a few degrees larger on a global scale can cause huge differences in climate in a lot of different areas. So it brings us to our concerns about global warming. Here are the concerns. Sea level would rise, right? Precipitation would alter. So areas that get a lot of rain would get less. Areas that get no rain would get more. So that's a difficult shift for plants and animals to adapt to. And then just the increase in temperature. So there are 6 different facets here that we're worried about. Impacts on health, right? Weather-related mortality, disease, air quality. Agriculture. Your crops can't grow if the temperatures are different or the precipitation is different, right? You may have to irrigate. We're seeing that in Southern California right now. It may not be an effect of global warming, but we're in a drought and it's more difficult to grow crops. You can't grow crops and you can't feed people. We get to the forest. Forest composition changes because the temperature, different plants live in different temperatures, different ranges. So the forest changes and productivity of that forest changes. We have water resources, right? Just like in California, we have a severe drought right now. There are other areas in the world that are getting flooded by rains. Whether this is because of global warming or not, it's what would happen if global warming continues, right? Areas that have lots of water might not in the future, and they're not prepared for that. Areas that don't have a lot of water or are getting flooded, they're also not prepared for that. Coastal areas, obviously, sea level rises, erosion of the beaches, flooding of coastal lands, costs to protect those lands. And then species in natural areas. Well, if the habitat changes, we lose species, we lose habitats. Less glaciers, less polar animals. The Arctic, talking about the polar bear, all these animals that you've seen on TV, that their range is being reduced because of global warming. So these are our 6 main concerns that what's going to happen if global warming continues. One of the other effects of global warming would be its effect on ocean currents. Right now, this is just a simplified view of the currents in the ocean. And when you bring warm water, that warm surface flow, close by the land areas, it really influences the temperature of those land areas. Well, these currents are dependent on temperature, right? If you suddenly change the temperature of the oceans, which is what's happening a little bit through global warming, this current system could be changed. If you alter this system, you've got these areas in Northern Europe that are really being warmed, in North America that are being warmed by these warm currents. If that doesn't happen, if that current stops or changes, then you've got colder temperatures starting to go down from the North and South Pole towards the equator. And that could bring us into an ice age. An ice age would be catastrophic for the human race. Our ability to grow crops would greatly diminish. If you look at this map here, you can see we're talking about winter sea ice maybe coming down to LA. Could you imagine the ocean being frozen all the way down to LA? All this area where we grow our crops, gone, right? Under snow, under ice, at least part of the year. So this is a situation where we would not be able to grow enough crops to feed our population. So ice age really is not a possibility for us. And the question is, are we causing this to happen sooner? By influencing global warming, is it going to trigger another ice age? And that's one of the fears that scientists have. Now, sure, ice ages are a normal cyclical part of our history, the Earth's history, right? Way before us. If we look at this, the upward spikes are increases in temperature, and the downward spikes would coincide with what we would call an ice age. Sometimes caused by carbon dioxide, sometimes caused by the orbit of the Earth and the Sun, right? There are times when the Earth is a little closer to the Sun. There are times when the Sun puts out more solar energy than other times. And there's been other effects, right? If a lot of volcanoes erupt, could send us into an ice age as well. So there's lots of factors, right? The only question scientists have right now are, is our influence, all the gases that we're producing at such a high rate with our huge 7 billion person population on this planet. Are we causing a shift, an abnormal shift, a much faster shift in climate than has historically happened? A faster shift is even more dangerous than a slow shift. Either one could be catastrophic for populations, but the faster shift gives less time for plants and animals to adapt and can cause much more severe results. So there is no question that we are experiencing a spike in temperature that could be followed by an ice age. The only thing that scientists argue about a little bit are we influencing that? And the majority of scientists feel that yes, human influence is having a great impact on global warming. So you can chew on that information about global warming and greenhouse gases while Rocco finishes off this piece of zucchini. Thank you for watching.